so that's going to be between now and 12 o'clock or 12:05. Then we'll take a short break for about 10 minutes, and then we will move into the second part where we will be more technical. Let's say we will talk about issues related to business models and the need for stronger collaboration in the recovery of the air transport sector. Just briefly going to say some introductory comments, and then we will start with the panel. I will ask each of the panelists to give some opening remarks for between 3 and 5 minutes. And as soon as we are finished with this first round, then I'll start with some questions. But as you may appreciate, it's very, very important to make this as interactive as possible. As it was said earlier, it's a matter of being among friends. It's a family environment, so we really need to engage into a proper discussion and deliver some proper results of added value as well. So thank you very much for being here, and I hope you will all enjoy the discussion today. So as I did many times so far, COVID-19 pandemic made year 2020 an annus horribilis, and both for aviation and tourism. Just to provide you with some numbers, scheduled passenger traffic fell by about 2.7 billion passengers. That's 60% compared to 2019. Again, we saw commercial airlines having an operating loss of close to $400 billion US dollars. And regarding the way forward, regarding 2021, if forecasts prove accurate, then we're expected to encounter a reduction between 1.9 and 2.2 billion passengers, which is between 40 and 49% again compared to what we had back in 2019, which means again a very bad year for airlines and for the entire ecosystem. Just to give you an indication of the scale, leading airlines according to ICAO are expected to lose close to 300 billion US dollars. And on top of that, we keep see travel restrictions coming in, coming out, depending very much on the dynamic developments regarding the pandemic. Not surprisingly, therefore, it's not only a bad year and I would say bad period for aviation, it's also for tourism. Just to give you some numbers from the UNWTO, the United Nations World Tourism Organization, international tourism arrivals dropped from 1,466,000,000 in 2019 to 398 million in 2020, and likewise we saw a drop of international tourism receipts from 1.456 billion US dollars in 2019 down to 536 billion in 2020. So essentially that took tourism back to the early 1990s. Now we're getting back into the future. We're stepping back into what was the case 30 years ago, but we very much hope to rebound soon. So in Greek we have a very interesting saying, which is ο καλός καπετάνιος στη φουρτούνα φαίνεται, which in print translation means that the good captain are in a position to show their skills during turbulence. And obviously we live in turbulent times, so I think the issues of leadership is of extreme importance. So I would like to kindly ask each of you to come to the podium to deliver some opening remarks for 3 to 5 minutes, and then we will start with the questions. So Henrik, please. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Andreas. And dear friends, such a delight, such a rare pleasure, I would even say, to be with you here together in person. I think that we have all been totally fed up of any kind of video meetings or whatever they are, which most of them don't work. I start with telling one story. We about a few months ago we had our annual EU-Japan transport dialogue, and usually a great event with nice side visits, great food, sake, wine, depending where it is. This time we did it virtual, no other way. So, meeting lasted not as normal, but one and a half hour more than normal. Why? Because it broke down all the time. It started off with no interpretation. They speak Japanese, we understand nothing. Some people who were not sitting with us, but somewhere else, said they get interpretation, we don't. Then we had a IT guy who was behind us who was totally lost. And at some moment, we didn't hear anything else, but only a bad word in Polish. I spare you with all the rest of the details. The conclusion of the meeting was drawn by me and my counterpart, the Vice Minister of Transport in Japan, that aviation has a bright future. I think that's a good place to start. I think that's a good place to start, and I think also it shows that those people who think that now the world has changed forever, I think they are wrong. I think we have seen that also now in the first weeks, at least in Europe, but in US already earlier, that whenever traveling has become possible, people hop on the planes. They are really keen to start traveling again. I think what we also need to be very mindful about is that there are certainly some fears. And what is absolutely essential is to win back the trust and the confidence of the traveling public. Why? Because we need to make sure that they understand that when they enter an airport and when they exit an airport, then this journey is done within the highest possible measures that guarantee the health safety, because we know that the aviation safety is anyway always guaranteed, as is security. But this health safety is an important element. I've been saying to airlines, I've been saying to airports, every step of the journey remind people that this is safe, but you have to follow this, you have to follow that. But I think that is absolutely essential. And it's good that people realize it, because we have seen also very good figures now over the last week in Europe in terms of the restart, in terms of more people flying. But this needs to be continuously nurtured, and this people need to understand. I think this is one of the key things that now in short term is there. I'm not talking about all the other things. I mean, we have done a lot of mistakes, and I think that we heard also an excellent presentation by the minister. When you talk about leadership, that was the leadership what I saw today. I don't see it in many other countries. I don't see it also in many other continents. I see politicians who are afraid of their own shadow and who let the health authorities to run their countries without taking the necessary decisions. Unfortunately, this is endemic, I would say, for the moment, and we need to do something about that as well by telling people that there are also other options. No risk can be fully mitigated, but the risks can be maximum mitigated possible. And that is what we are doing also in aviation, and I think this is absolutely essential. I think we have plenty of time to talk about the restart. We have plenty of time to talk about the recovery as well. I think these are all important elements, and there are many things I think we need to look into also. We need to see whether our global system is also fit for purpose. I think there are many flaws. You can say that this is the opportunity. It is definitely an opportunity. And I also like to make another quote, which is by Theodore Roosevelt, who said, look, the good thing is to do the right thing at the right time. The second best thing to do is the wrong thing at the right time. But worst thing is to do nothing. And I think this is clear, that now it's not the time to do nothing. Also, it's not the moment where we would say aviation will come back and will be business as usual. Our world is going to be slightly different, and the sector also has to adjust that. Having all these challenges, which also can be seen as opportunities in this sector, I think there is another factor, which is that we need to see what are the societal expectations and what are the political expectations. Yes, they do differ from continent to continent, but we have seen, I think Europe is giving you a pre-taste, and I see that also this is becoming much more embedded in the US political and also certainly to extend the societal expectations. And this is that this sector has to become more sustainable. We have done a lot of mistakes in the past, and I'm not going to go into details. Those who know me also know that there is a four-letter organization, I think, who has messed up a lot when it comes to showing to people that aviation actually cares about the environment and it can be sustainable. The complacency over the years is now actually costing the industry a lot. That means that from coming out from the crisis, it's also very important to say this sector is going to be more sustainable. This sector is going to put a lot of focus to that. The only fact we know is that it's not going to be easy. There is no one solution. There is no magic wand to do that. For that, what you need is a combination of different measures, which include what we do on the global level in ICAO, or as little as we do on the global level, what we do on the regional level, and of course innovation, efficiency, efficient flying. I mean, in Europe it's a joke that the single European sky, which can cut 10% of the emissions, have been shut down by the complacent and totally inward-looking ANSPs. I think it's a disgrace for Europe, but we have to live with it, and we keep on fighting. But now we come to the most important component, which is that the single most important element when it comes to the sustainability are the sustainable aviation fuels. And this is something where we can all agree. The question is also about the details. As always, devil is somewhat among the details. But as long as we all agree that this is a key where we need to focus, I think we are in a good place. But we come from a very low base as such, 0.05% of total use. How do we get to about 65% in 2050? Of course, that means, of course, full industrialization, and of course that means that you have the availability of the fuels, but you also need to have the incentives to use it. So, in Europe at least, we are going to put on the table next week our most important proposal, which is the refuel aviation, and which is foreseeing at least the strategy how to get first 10 years from 0.05 to 5%. And how to get from 5% to 65% in the next 20 years. But of course, life around us is changing. We see how we get there. So, sustainability has to be fully embedded on anything that aviation is going to do in the future. And not only in terms of we are doing it, but in terms of we are also talking about it, and we mean it what we do. Because otherwise, there's going to be a lot of trouble. Next week, the Commission is going to put on the table a number of other proposals that we have been also fighting a lot to get them more proportionate. The thread that goes through is that every proposal would add additional costs to aviation, including taxes on kerosene as a proposal, including, of course, the phasing out of the free allowances when it comes to the ETS, and so on and so on. Costs are going to go up, but if the sustainability message doesn't go through, and the societal and political expectations, or rather I would say perceptions, false or right, are going to continue as they are, then there will be more costs. And there will be people who would say, no, we don't want to have a greener aviation, we just want to get rid of it. Think about the country here. I spoke to the Minister and the Minister of Transport about that. Country where I come from, which are all peripheral countries, we all depend on aviation. We don't think life can be without aviation, but there are people who do. And let's not think that this minority, which is a vocal minority, is not growing. I think we have to be ready for that. Last but not least, having said all that, let's also not forget that aviation, success of global aviation, is about competition. Competition in the region, competition between airlines from different regions. Competition is healthy. It has driven the connectivity. It has also given us the affordability of aviation. And we need to maintain that. In Europe, it means the integrity of the single European aviation area, but it also means that we are open to other countries. Pandemic has also brought us, besides the opportunities, many bad things. One of them has been inward-looking approach, trying to also create more protectionist environment. This is not what is needed. This is bad for aviation, this is bad for trade, this is bad for humanity. And I think we need to show the way. I'm very happy that just a few weeks ago we finished negotiations between the European Union and the ASEAN bloc, which opens up now market for 1.1 billion people. The first ever block-to-block agreement in the world, the largest open aviation area in the world as a result of this agreement. Europe continues to open up. Our ministers just agreed the signing of the agreement with 4 countries, including with Qatar, the first ever Middle East country or Gulf country that so many airlines have been fighting against. The first ever Gulf country that is going to have a comprehensive air transport agreement with Europe and is going to, and has signed up to the clause of the fair competition as well as social standards. This is also a big achievement and a game changer. We want to keep Europe open. Let's also try to keep the world open. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Henrik. May I kindly invite Nick to the podium? Thank you.
Thank you, Andreas. So first again, I want to thank Kostas and Evgenia for their hospitality and making us feel warm and at home and in such a pleasant environment. I've just been reminded to speak up because my voice is gravelly to begin with, and sometimes I don't speak up, so I will. So after that, I want to start with a story as well, because I note that these stools swivel, and my wife has prohibited in our house any chair that swivels, because if I'm in one, I tend to move around, so I'm going to try to be careful. So I noticed early on in Zoom calls, because my desk chair does swivel, that people were going like this. And then I realized because I was going back and forth and swinging around. So I'm not a big fan of Zoom like Henrik. Anyway, I'm really happy to be here. This is my first overseas trip in almost 18 months. And it was such a joy to get on a plane that was full coming here, which leads to my next point. The minister was so analytical and so action-oriented. My hat's off to Greece for what you're doing and bringing people here. There's a reason you now have 10 direct flights, because you've been really smart about it and you've created for yourself a competitive advantage that, frankly, we'll talk about this more, I'm sure, my government continues to miss. So we're supposed to be talking about leadership, and I've got some prepared remarks here that I'm going to just ignore. You know about what happened to passenger levels and all of that, but there's been big changes in the industry, and the industry has led. I'd like to say that my members reacted extraordinarily quickly. They all put in place a series of protocols to reassure passengers that it was still safe to fly. About April 2020, near the end, we were talking, and I decided we could talk till we were blue in the face, an American expression, but people were not going to be reassured by the airlines talking about how safe it was to fly. So we put together a consortium, I would call it, with Boeing, Airbus, GE Aviation, the Vantage Airport Group, and Raytheon Collins, to get a study done or to engage Harvard University, the National Preparedness Leadership Institute, which is a combination of the Harvard School of Public Health and the Kennedy School of Government. They specialize in crisis management and in leadership. And we had acted. We had already started, I think, to show leadership. We needed an independent assessment. We were able to convince our consortium members that this was going to be an independent study that would examine all the levels of risk mitigation that we had already put into place, tell us what was working and what was not, but also an independent analysis of the science and the medicine that were out there. Because if you recall early on, almost anybody who had doctor in front of his name could get on camera and offer his opinion, you know, unfounded or otherwise, about the dangers of flying and everything. We had a very good story to tell. And anyway, the study proceeded. It started with the onboard, the gate-to-gate experience. Then it went from basically curb to curb with the Air Force. And we included then ACI North America and AAAE in North America into the study as partners and looked at what they were doing. And Harvard made some recommendations that required us to make changes for boarding and deplaning, among other things. How we did it, how we served food, and we'd already started making changes. Long story short, we changed the narrative on the safety of flying, because if you say the Harvard School of Public Health, as opposed to Nick Calio or Airlines for America, you know, or ERA or any one of our groups, it's a different story. We started to control the narrative. We said repeatedly, we will rely on medicine and science. That requires leadership, and right now, I agree with Henrik, at least in the U.S. and I think in other places, we've had multiple, like we have multiple layers of risk mitigation. We have had multiple layers of response, and a lot of it was reactionary and not founded on science or on medicine. And we need to work on that and show leadership even beyond what we've done to try to get our governments to do that. In the United States currently, we are very cautious, and our politicians are rooted in the science of the past because there is an out. We should be opening up, as the EU is, as Greece has, to people who are vaccinated. You know what? If somebody doesn't want to get vaccinated, that's their business. But they shouldn't stop everybody else from flying because there is an economic cost to that. So, again, we'll try to get that. I'm going to end my remarks here so we can keep going. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Montserrat, may I kindly invite you? Thank you.
Thank you. So first of all, thank you, Kostas, of course. When I texted Kostas to say, I'm very excited, this is my best trip, and I realized I meant to say my first trip, but it was obviously the best and the only. Okay. So, because I haven't been anywhere apart from my home country in 17 months since March last year. So, yeah, very sad. But so not a Zoom fan either. So I'm very glad to be here. And this environment also, in its atmosphere, is amazing. And the first thing, actually, I got this quote that has been said millions of times: never get a good crisis go to waste, from Winston Churchill, right? This is not a good crisis. This is a phenomenal crisis. This is an extraordinary crisis. This is something else. So how we deal with it, how we then become different people, because we're not going to go back to what we were. Things are going to change. It's not perhaps radical change. I know Henrik said that, you know, he doesn't expect to go to a totally different world, and I understand. I agree with that, but I still think it's going to be different. We need to, and it should be. If you think of the Japanese on their Kaizen method, it's about continuous improvement, but it's also about changing for better. So you need to change to become better. The other thing I think we have in this industry is the approach to safety that can be very well extrapolated and used for this crisis, because and I used to work for the cruise business, also cruise industry, before coming into aviation, and there was a saying that there is never perfect safety, but there is a perfect attitude towards safety, and that's something that we can definitely implement after this crisis, is the perfect dedication to not let it happen again, and lessons learned, and how to incorporate that into the way we work, the way we operate, the legislation that's going forward, etc. So another element that was already mentioned is sustainability. It's not about building back better, it's about building back greener. If we don't do that, we just simply cannot operate. And I'm saying this from Europe, which is obviously the continent that is under a greater pressure, but this is going to spread. It's going to be the same everywhere else very soon. And I've been with the association 3.5 years, and it's changed so much in the last 3 years. So now sustainability is a license to grow, it's a license to operate, it's a license for us associations to have a voice when we speak with the institutions, with our members as well. So I think it's something that it's definitely there as the main priority. And yeah, I think in terms of what I mentioned about change for the better and learning how to adapt, perhaps we need to start thinking about the small and medium-sized players as well, because, you know, there are going to be market forces that are going to perhaps not be the way they used to be, and then, you know, the regulatory mechanisms need to be there to not to take for granted that the market mechanisms are going to be perfectly okay, because this is not business as usual. This is for now, but I do have 2 more minutes, because I made a survey that's quite interesting, and I wanted to share with you guys. amongst my members, I don't know how many of you know my association, but we are a European association. We represent between 50 and 60 airlines. We lost a few, unfortunately. We lost 4 during the last 12 months. So we're on 55 airlines at the moment, and we have all these other associate companies, airports, air navigation service providers, and suppliers, and manufacturers, and aviation services companies that actually contribute as associate members. And I did a survey earlier, 2 weeks ago, and they came up with some responses that are very interesting. I want to share with you. So I raised 3 questions with them. One was, what are the concerns for our industry? Okay, and what are the main priorities and concerns for you and for the next 12 months? The second question was, what is the priorities for your operation, so for your particular business? And the third question is, what do you think the association should be focusing on, and how can we add value to you? And the first 2, which is the industry and the business, the results were very similar. So I'm going to give it to the audience. So what do you think was the number 1 thing, number 1 priority for 50 European airlines? Survive. Absolutely, survive. So financial stability, survive, market recovery, staying commercially relevant, protecting revenue, consumer confidence, survive. So go back to what I was. That was it, or at least retain some of my business. So that was the number 1. Okay, what's the number 2? Keith.
I'm sure it's green, right? It's probably sustainability.
It's travel restrictions.
Oh, is it restrictions?
It's travel restrictions because this is Europe. You know, this is all this mess of.
It's your spaghetti bowl.
Yeah, it's the mess of dealing with all these borders that, you know, for years we haven't been used to that anymore. So yeah, lifting travel restrictions and being able to move freely and harmonization. And the third one was from the cost side of the business. So I think financial stability and survival is more on the revenue side, but also on the cost is because control, effective restart of operations. They're worried that, you know, because the crews have been disconnected, they need to bring them back, you know, train them and retain them. The morale of their staff is down. It's not easy, and there are increased operational costs. And the fourth one is sustainability. So it's only number 4, but we have to understand that sustainability was not in the surveys 4 years ago. It was like, yeah, 1 or 2 airlines up north there, maybe in Sweden or something, they were saying, oh yeah, sustainability is, but not, the Mediterranean airlines did not raise it. Now they do. Now they are the pioneers, so that's great. When it comes to so that's for the industry. When it comes to their operation, it's similar things that were just said, but then they bring up additional things like staff morale, retention, unfair competition. I don't know who said this, but basically I understand is maybe they have some market issues. Managing debt. A lot of these airlines got a lot of debt. Only a few got state aid, but a lot got, like, you know, refinancing through banks and lessors, etc. So managing the debt is massive. Fleet modernization. Obviously, they need to be more efficient. And EU261, which is a classic, you know, dealing with compensation for passengers and making it sensible. EU ETS, which is okay. And the last one is the priorities for the association. So for the associations, what do you guys from associations think they want us to do? The number 1 thing they want us to work on in Europe?
The leadership of the association should be there?
It's sustainability. It's sustainability. So that means that, exactly, I mean, they can't do it alone. They need the association that has the platform to then liaise with other associations and players and stakeholders to then, at the same time, then escalate it and then have a proper dialogue with the institutions, and together we can build, well, we're asking for a pact, but yes, we can build in the framework so that we can deliver neutrality, carbon neutrality by 2050, which is what we're claiming. So that was the number 1. Number 2 is obviously get rid of the travel restrictions and just advocate for digital pass and smooth travel. And number 3 is all the regulatory operational issues, you know, stuff that has to do with slots, Peter one was here again, state aid, because there's concern about that distortions it can bring. And another one, the fourth one, is industry reputation. So we hear a lot about the industry. I think there is a big responsibility from all of us to contribute to build the reputation of our industry, which has been damaged. And I think throughout all these months that we've been working behind the scenes on making aviation greener, and just obviously making clear that the benefits that the aviation brings into everyone's life, I think we've got an opportunity now after these to prove the value that our industry brings, and it can be done on a clean way. So, yeah, this is from my side.
So much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Andreas. So I'm going to give you the perspective of the situation that we have in Latin America. My name is Rafael Echevarne. I'm the Director General of ACI Latin America. ACI, of course, being the organization that represents the interests of the airport industry. And as you probably know, or if you don't know, ACI is actually divided into regions. So I actually head the one for Latin America and the Caribbean. My responsibility goes from Mexico all the way to Antarctica, including the Caribbean. And I mention that because one of the most interesting things that really have come out of this situation that we are going through is to realize the importance of aviation. I mean, and how incredibly disconnected this idea is from some politicians. I mean, the fact that some countries in the Caribbean have completely shut down aviation is just mind-boggling. It's just incredible, okay? And the fact that today entire countries of the size of Chile or Argentina are still closed to the arrivals of international passengers is just unbelievable. I'm sure that Jose will actually mention some of the ridiculous situations that we are facing. But this actually demonstrates that we need to actually improve in how we convey the idea of the importance of aviation and the impact that it has on the economics and society to these politicians that actually are ruling us, okay? I think that's very, very interesting. Now, they actually have approached this whole idea from the point of view of zero risk. And as you know, zero risk is impossible. I mean, unfortunately, and I'm sure that the same thing has happened in Europe, in many countries in Latin America, the governments have left the decisions in the hands of the ministries of health. Okay, and of course, they have actually adopted this position of zero risk, and unfortunately, the leaders, have not challenged that, or have actually found alternatives, or actually found a compromise. Okay, that is actually very interesting. Now, as I say, our region has no option but aviation. I mean, in Europe, at least you can drive, or you can take the train between some countries. Okay. I mean, I'm not saying that is the ideal solution, but you have an alternative, or even in the US, actually you can, go by track or road. But in Latin America, it's absolutely impossible. In the Caribbean, it's absolutely impossible. I mean, countries that actually are joined geographically, Panama and Colombia, there is no road between Panama and Colombia. No road. You have the Darien Gap, one of the last, wild frontiers in the world, a jungle. There is no road. Within Colombia, if you want to travel from Bogota, the capital city, to Medellin, the second largest city, by plane is only 30 minutes, 40 minutes. By road, you can go by road, definitely, but it's over 10 hours by road. So yeah, it's actually very interesting to see what we are facing. Now, unfortunately, in Latin America, not only we have that challenge, but actually we have a challenge that is a political challenge. Whereas in Europe, at least you have the European Union, okay, and the US, of course, you are a big country with one federal government, understanding that, of course, there are many challenges there within Europe. In Latin America, there is absolutely no cohesion, there is no coordination whatsoever, okay? So it's been absolutely mad, okay, from the point of view of actually trying to come up with a common solution there. So, it's very difficult from a leadership point of view, actually, to impose a view. And so, interestingly, they actually look at international organizations. So ICAO is very important in Latin America. So all these countries immediately look at ICAO. But unfortunately, perhaps we haven't actually got the leadership that we were expecting, okay? Which actually leads me to this point that, international organizations, to tell you the truth, are rather weak. When I say international organizations, I mean, organizations where, the governments are actually represented, not the ones like ALTA, IATA, or ACI. And actually, it's very interesting because we've taken the lead in a way, and we have actually tried to persuade governments of the way to go, okay? And it's been very interesting because, I think for the first time is when we've actually collaborated, with all these different organizations, ALTA, IATA, ACI, CANSO. We have these regular gatherings, these regular letters being sent to governments in order to demonstrate to them that their policies are not really taking us anywhere, okay? Unfortunately, and we were discussing that with Jose, there comes a point where you say, what else can I do? The buck goes only so far, I mean, now is the time when the governments actually have to take action, okay? And we were saying, unless we organize some sort of revolution, we will not get anywhere, okay? And I'm all for revolution here, So, very interesting from that point of view. And unfortunately, many of the decisions, and I know that that's been the case, of course, in Europe and in America, has been led by populism, okay? The populist positions of the governments, which is probably the easiest position to take, okay? And in some instances, in some countries, actually that has reinforced the incredible protectionistic views and positions that were already there, and now it's even more. And as you were saying, sir, very important, the idea of liberalization, of openness, Unfortunately, in Latin America, we need that desperately. I mean, within the Caribbean, it's extremely difficult to travel. You always have to go to Miami to go between islands, In the rest of Latin America, it's the same thing, So the potential is fantastic from the point of view of aviation, and I have no doubt that aviation will play a very important role from both the economic and social point of view, which is something that very often I find that the politicians are not aware of. And I keep on saying whenever I have the opportunity to speak, that, it's not just the economic development from the point of view of the business people going back and forth. It's the possibility of a student going and study in another university outside his hometown. The possibility of going and visiting your family. The possibility of going for a weekend break, which we take for granted in some parts of the world, but in Latin America was up and coming with the local carriers and so on and so forth, but unfortunately, it's come to an end. So, I will not bore you with the figures, but actually it's very interesting to see that in Latin America we have two extremes in terms of how the pandemic is affecting air transportation. We have two different speeds, depending on the country you are at. I'll first mention Mexico. Mexico, interestingly enough, was the only country in the entire world that I am aware of that didn't impose any restrictions to air travel. None whatsoever. Anyone can come into Mexico, anyone can leave Mexico. You don't need any demonstration of being vaccinated or PCR test or antigen test, none whatsoever. Now, that may have been a very bold decision. Some could perhaps say reckless decision by the government of Mexico, but the reality is that right now, Mexico, in some airports, they are already above 2019 figures, like for example in the case of Tijuana, okay? So very interesting, okay? And interesting enough too, the incidence of COVID in Mexico is not higher than in other countries that have been extremely restricted, that have actually shut down, like the case of Argentina or Chile or Uruguay. So very interesting, okay? That to me demonstrates that all these restrictions really haven't had any impact whatsoever. So, very interesting. And then we go to the other extremes that I was talking about. So in general, in Latin America we have these two different speeds at which we are traveling. Fortunately, some countries like Costa Rica, like Dominican Republic, have actually also copied the situation in Mexico, and they don't impose any requirements. Obviously, they depend very much on tourism, and good for them, because as I say, there is absolutely no relationship between that and the spread of the virus. And finally, I just want to say about sustainability. I mean, I was very interested when I started this job in ACI Latin America, which was 1 year ago, because for us the big question was going to be sustainability. Are they really serious in this part of the world? Okay, and I was particularly thinking of Brazil in particular. But I am very glad to say that sustainability is ranked among the top 2 objectives, together of course with safety, okay, and the recovery. Okay, safety is like, you know, take that for given, it's a given, of course, you know, but you know, the recovery and sustainability are the 2 top priorities. And as a matter of fact, many of the airport operators in Brazil have taken this at heart. I mean, for example, VANSI, the big airport operator, who just got one of the concessions, the last concession, which, by the way, where actually the tendering process happened earlier this year, and we all thought that maybe it was not going to succeed because of the COVID situation. You know, fortunately, it was a huge success, and VANSI got the group of airports in the Amazon. And one of the things that they have said is that they want to comply with all the, well, they want to adhere to the airport carbon accreditation that ACI has as one of its services and products. So yes, very, very excited to hear that. And one last thing about sustainability. I used to run, before I joined ACI Latin America, I was for 5 years the CEO of an airport in Jamaica, Montego Bay. And it was very interesting, the discussion there, because you need to have 2 things. On the one hand, you have to have the philosophical position. You have to be convinced that this is good, you know, that sustainability is something that you really believe. But I used to say to everyone, but the interesting thing is that today, with the cost of renewables, it actually makes sense economically. It makes sense to invest in solar panels in an airport like Montego Bay, because actually it ends up being cheaper to run the airport than the way it was before. So this is actually something very interesting, and I don't mind if that is the case, because actually it supports the whole objective of sustainability. So this would be my opening remarks. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. It's a great pleasure to be here with you, and I'd like to say thank you to Costa and his family to open his house for us here in this beautiful place. And for me, I would like to say that it's a special moment, and just because when I left Brazil, I just left my father with his 82 years, and he was crying just because it was the first time that his son could come to Greece. And I was flying to that, and my father loves the history of this country. So I'm very glad to be here. I have to leave the place later to take some pictures to take this to my daddy. And thank you Costa, for this invitation, because it's amazing to be here. And I saw that you guys were saying, hey, we have about 200 years. We are celebrating 200 years of the revolution. I would say that you are here. You have much more years fighting for us, fighting for freedom, fight for everything. So we know the history. Congratulations, guys, for more than 2,000 years fight for what is true and for the freedom that we all want. So thank you very much for that. So it's a great opportunity. My name is Ricardo. I'm the CEO and Executive Director of ALTA. We are the Latin American Air Transport Association. We get just the airline that are based in Latin America, but also that those that fly to and from Latin America and the whole chain of suppliers and everything. But I would like to bring some words. I know that we don't have much more time too, but I would like to bring some words, because I saw the title of this is about leadership, and with leadership leadership brings always responsibility. I saw once when I read The Servant of James Hunt, I saw that when you talk about leadership, it's not about taking, but it's about give. And as an association, I would say to you that we have been working with our partnership, with our stakeholders, since the first beginning of this crisis. In the first beginning, I thought that this was the worst thing that we had in the history was the Second War, but after almost 1 year, I would say that we never saw something like that. But we never saw something like that in the bad way, because this enemy is in each country, but is invisible. We just have to fight with something that is invisible. But also, I've never seen something like that in a good way. And what is the good way? Leadership. And when you talk about how can we lead that, I would say that we have two questions here. Is who is going to be this leadership? Who is going to take that? And how we're going to work with this leadership. Who, I agree with my colleagues, the ICAO has had and has a tremendous responsibility with this standard for the whole world. But how, I believe that we, as an industry, in our way, we have done everything that was possible. But how can we now do in a standard way in order to bring confidence and bring people again for civil aviation? I liked it the way that CART was done. Do you remember the nights in the round table? There is not just one leader. We are leaders. Let's sit, let's talk, and let's solve the problem. And I believe that that was done because it was the first time that we put together government. Because when you talk about ICAO, you're not talking about, we are a small part of this stakeholder there. But what we see there actually is the government of each country. So you put together the government and the industry, ACI, IATA, ALTA, many of that. The problem is, how can we deal? Because we could say, okay, we agree with this leadership and we agreed with how that was done. But the problem is that, and I'm talking about Latin America and Caribbean, our area, what happens is that when you get the protocols, the layers that was done, but was not done by the industry, was done with the government, by the umbrella of ICAO. When you go to the country and say, look, we have this. In the first beginning, the vaccine wasn't there, but we had protocols that we could follow. What's said here? Safety is everything for us. Yes, this is safety is everything for this industry, but more than ever, biosafety as well. If you go to the airport, you're going to see the protocols. If you go to the airlines, you're going to see the protocols. We have protocols for everything. So why not flying? If I have these lines, and now much more with the vaccine, or even with programs for vaccine, why do you have to do quarantine? Why you are killing jobs? Why you are killing this industry? Especially in Latin America and Caribbean, we don't have railroads, guys, as you have here in Europe. We don't have good roads from Mexico to the end of the world in Ushuaia, in Argentina. Instead of that, we have a country that is shut down everything, like was done in Argentina, like has been doing in many other countries. So what is the point? We just go there under the leadership of the government agents, UN government agents, with a protocol that we understood very well because we are in the field. We just show there and say, look, this is the protocol. Okay, you are not accepted that. You have to do something different. And we have to do something different in each country. This is very difficult. Maybe because what happened was, I don't know if afraid of or political issues, what happens in Latin America and Caribbean, I believe in the whole world, Rafael said here, the problem is in each country is under the umbrella of the Minister of Health. Okay, so let's try to talk to them. Let's bring the idea. We go there, and you show that, okay, we are not vector. We have studies about that. We have everything about that. We just go there and you show to them, look, why can I travel? I don't know if everybody here knows about the yellow fever card. Everybody knows, yeah? I can go in any country with a paper that says, okay, I'm vaccinated for yellow fever card. And you accepted it. But with the COVID, the people was, we need something that is touchless. We need more technology. So we brought everything with QR. I mean, my vaccine is here with the QR. To come to Greece, I got the QR. So if I go to Panama, the QR. But when I get my vaccine, that was done, and they have the paper and the technology, I don't have the seamless travel. It's impossible because the government says, okay, as soon as you get, you are going to have to do another PCR. But I was vaccinated. What's the point of that? So I believe that the leadership right now means that see it again, because the answer for our industry is there already. We have the protocols, we have the vaccine, we have the programs, but the question is, how can you accept my paper and leave me travel? How can I give you confidence to bring people again to fly? Maybe, and this is maybe, we're talking about this, the answer is in our passport. Why I'm saying that? Because why the passport? We can use our passport in any country that you go. Why, when you have a common market, how can I use my driver license to fly? How? You see here, this is the MERZ. The MERZ is a code that is under the umbrella of ICAO. Oh, I mean, again, is under the umbrella of the ICAO. If you have the MERZ and machine, what you call MERTD, can read it. So why not? Why? Maybe we have to stand with that. Why? How can we together go to the World Health Organization and say, look, just ask to the country to put in the paper, in the APP, whatever, the MERZ code, and the MERTD machine is going to read that. So you can accept that, because this was validated under the surveillance of ICAO. This is maybe. Because the situation in Latin America and Caribbean that we are living right now is that what you see is country that, okay, just is not 600 passengers. Yes, they closed it and said, it's 600 seats. So how can I manage that? How can the industry manage that? Which airlines come first? How can I deal with that without creating some disorder in the market? Or what is worse? Okay, we are going to increase taxes. We are going to increase taxes. How can you do that? We have to go there with this leadership and talk in just one voice. So, first of all, I'd like to say thank you very much. And since I believe that my friends here said about Roosevelt, someone told about Churchill, I'd like to bring something that Churchill said in the past. What we're going to discuss, we're going to say here is not easier. We know that. But the leadership comes from what is not easier. I know that it's hard. We're going to fight a lot in a good way to say, in a good sense, but we're going to stand for the industry, to talk, to have a voice, and information more than ever. So, just to end, I'd like to bring something that Churchill said once when he was called in the university to say something. Everyone was expecting for a huge speech. The wizard old guy just stands and said, never, 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 and never give up. I believe this is the leadership. So thank you very much.
Okay, I'm conscious of time, but I think we can have a first round of questions and then see how we do. So, Nick, I would like to ask you a question about the Biden administration. So, What do you see in the US regulatory pipeline under the current administration in terms of leadership from a competition and consumer protection point of view?
I think it's a work in progress. The Biden administration came in with a very different agenda, obviously, than the Trump administration had. Probably the single, whatever else it did, the single best thing the Trump administration did was try to deregulate regulations that weren't producing the benefit that they were supposed to. And airlines benefited greatly from that. There's going to be an executive order signed today about competition. It's supposed to be mostly about monopolies. There's some stuff in there about airlines and baggage fees and Wi-Fi refund, both of which, you know, our baggage fees are very transparent. Everybody knows them. The Wi-Fi, you pick the plan you want on the plane. Almost all of our member airlines, if the Wi-Fi does not work correctly, you get a refund by the time you get off the plane on your phone. So when I say it's a work in progress, we're waiting to see. We think there's going to be a big rush on consumer-related issues, and those issues ought to be related to science and data, always, in terms of the regulation, rather than just regulating for the sake of regulation. That can constrain the industry. We have taken the tack, do no harm. We are still a very fragile industry. In the U.S., we're still losing $95 million a day. Every single day, 95 million. Is that better? Yes. Domestic travel is coming back. We need international travel to open. We can go on about this, but I'm sure as we get to further questions, we'll have more to say about it. Thank you.
Thank you. And Henrik, you referred to the recent agreement signed between the Commission and ASEAN countries and also Qatar, which is certainly very good in terms of opening our borders. But as you rightly said before, currently the short term is very different. So from a leadership point of view, how proactive do you think is the European Commission in terms of letting us go through this impasse?
I'm sorry, I didn't catch the last sentence.
Yeah, I would say from a leadership point of view, we've seen that the European Commission has been quite proactive in terms of signing all these new agreements, but in terms of overcoming this current impasse that we're facing, how proactive do you think the European Commission has been?
Well, thank you, Andreas. I think we are 10 times more proactive in trying to deal with the current crisis than with anything else. So I don't think that these things have nothing to do with each other from that perspective. I think that when you look at it today, and I think I said it also in my opening remarks, the first and foremost is the restart of the aviation industry, but this is a complex issue. It's a holistic aspect. I mean, here we talk about the travel restrictions, we talk about the whole sort of transport, mobility and tourism industry where aviation plays a significant part. So this is the most immediate priority which we have been dealing over the last 18 months and will continue to deal. And I'm happy to see that, you know, the digital COVID certificates have also yielded in some good results. So what does it mean? It means that our primary focus is to open up the intra-European travel. And I think there we are succeeding because we see that the passenger numbers are already above 50%. The number of flights in the European airspace was last week already 65%. I'm talking, of course, in comparison to 2019. Yesterday I had a wonderful dinner with my good friend, the CEO of the Aegean Airlines, who said that they are now doing about 70%. So it's not bad. We are seeing that thanks to these digital COVID certificates, thanks to the more harmonization between different member states, we are coming in a situation where the immediate restart has at least yielded some good results. Then obviously our big focus is to try to open up the transatlantic market, and of course we have been speaking to Nick and Keith, Patricia, and of course I speak to US airline CEOs and US administration. I mean, there we have a big problem. Europe has made the first step. The first step has been to open up the non-essential travel from US to EU, and this is also the reason why you have today 10 direct flights from US to Greece every day. And I think this is a very positive development. Unfortunately, this has not been reciprocated by the US administration. I will be very honest to say that we are disappointed in Biden administration. We were expecting when he came to Europe and talking about the, reuniting with Europe and sort of restart or kind of new beginnings with Europe, and we all appreciated that very much. We expected that at least he would also open up the non-essential travel from Europe to US, which has not been the case. The working group is working also today, but my understanding is that we shouldn't expect anything positive in the next weeks to come. I think I'm very frustrated. I know Nick is very frustrated. He's also pushing the administration, but at least this is something which also has an impact on how the recovery and how the restart and the recovery is taking place, because those carriers which are particularly dependent on the long-haul flights, for them, opening up of the US market would be absolutely essential for both sides of the Atlantic. And then, of course, we look at the immediate neighborhood, and the immediate neighborhood there, Turkey, of course, is an issue, and many other countries, but again, except Turkey, the others are not as huge markets. So again, it will happen, but it's not going to happen overnight. So my bottom line is to say that our focus, proactive focus, is the restart, recovery, and then at the same time to address many of those challenges which have not disappeared. We talk about sustainability. We also need to talk about the issues of capacity. We are going to see major problems when we are getting back to normal, whether it happens in the end of 22 or in the beginning of 25. We are going to see major problems again in the European airspace. We are going to see major problems in many European airports, because of the policies that are currently being pursued, the airport expansion is going to be, there's going to be put a lid on the airport expansion. The airports will have more difficulties in getting financing from the non-commercial sources, which has been the case in the past. They have also been granted, from EU money and so on. So there are going to be many other challenges we need to proactively address. At the same time, to preserve the single European aviation area, where the competition and connectivity and affordability has been the norm, is a cornerstone, and to pursue the further liberalization. I wouldn't call that liberalization. I call that building a comprehensive relationship, because it's not only about markets, it's about cooperation in safety, security, AGM, and so on. So building a comprehensive partnership with partners around the world should be and must be another important element of our external aviation policy, because that is also how we pursue the European interest and how we would be able to get more countries also to sign up to the certain principles that we value here in Europe.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
And Montserrat, I have a question for you, because you referred to the Japanese Kaizen model, the total quality management model, and more recently people have been talking about the Six Sigma approach, and even more recently about the Lean Six Sigma, which means how you can be low cost and achieve excellence at the same time. But that was in the pre-COVID-19 world, because what you mentioned today was also about survival. And I would like to ask you, do you think that regional carriers of Europe are in a position to be lean but achieve excellence and high quality at the same time, or is it time to just stick into the lean part because of the need to survive?
Every time I'm asked a question about the regional carriers in Europe, it's so generic, and you cannot make assessments for all the regional carriers because they're all so different. You have to take into consideration, Europe is made of many different countries, different languages, cultures, geographies. Also, the business models of the regional airlines are completely different, from some low cost to full service, ACMI providers, fully capacity providers for others, franchise airlines, even virtual airlines. We're seeing a lot of new virtual airlines are subcontracting capacity with others. So it's very diverse. It's so diverse, and you cannot, one thing is not for everyone. But I can give particular examples of members that are of regional airlines that are doing great things in the industry. And actually, I was yesterday with one of them. I mention it just because we're here. It's Sky Express. Mm-hmm. Sky Express is the airline that, together with Aegean, is providing the connectivity to Greece. And basically, they've been, a tiny little airline with 6, 7, 8 yards, 42s, and then we went a couple of 72s. And today is going to be announced they're taking delivery of 6 new ATRs, and they also now started operating A320neos. And so it's an airline that has been continuously expanding and making new routes and taking risks. And taking risks have actually taken them quite far. The thing is, obviously, you need to have the muscle, and the story with these airlines, they're part of a bigger group, and the group is actually providing them with the financing that they need. But once the investments are there, the airlines are able to deliver. The problem is that when the small airlines have not got the right investments to continue expanding and investing, then obviously they're stuck. But I see amazing initiatives, changing delivery, in terms of consumer experience on board, in terms of different products that can be built and purchased in advance, being on the top of the list of the Kajak and Sky Scanner because being so green, because that's what they do. They do some based on CO2 emissions, so they're there, opening new routes, now flying, competing with Aegean. They're now flying to Central Europe and to Western Europe, to Rome and Paris, and then the capitals, London, and also to Germany, Austria. Obviously they're very, very excited, and there are lots of risk involved, but they think they can do it, and it's going to happen. So I think we're going to see things are going to be necessarily different, and we're going to see maybe opportunities also for the smaller airlines. It's not just all, we'll see consolidation, well, there will be some will disappear. We've lost a few already, but then some will reinvent themselves, and they will through partnerships, through being capacity providers to the larger guys, and through maybe picking up also on some of the routes that have been maybe abandoned or with less passengers. We still are in a, Henrik said, yeah, we earn, okay, passenger numbers, okay, we're picking up. There's still more than nearly 6,000 routes that have not been operated. So, okay, we're still there. We need to see how many of those routes are going to be back in operation. And that's very important because that's part of the connectivity and the capillarity that the European airlines bring. So that's absolutely key. But I think some of these guys are going to be, reviving and resuscitating even stronger and picking up some of the good parts of the business that are still there.
Thank you. Now,